So now let's take a quick recap of the whole chapter. So we started the chapter with a definition of federalism. That federalism is a form of government. It is a system where power is divided between the central government and the state governments. In case we have a third tier of the government, it is divided among all three levels. Yes? And each tier of the government functions autonomously. That is, the state governments have power of their own. Apart from that, we also discuss about difference between unitary as well as federal form of government. How unitary form of government has a single level of government. In case, even if it has a third tier of the government, the second and the third tier of the government do not have autonomous powers. They depend on the central government for the exercise of their powers in the unitary form of government. However, in a federal system, the state governments have autonomous powers. We then moved on to the different features of federalism, where the main features of federalism were: point number one, saying that federalism, a federal system, has at least two tiers of the government. Point number two, explaining that each tier of the government has different jurisdiction, and this jurisdiction is mentioned in the Constitution. The basic principles of the Constitution cannot be changed unilaterally, that is, by just one level of the government, right? Apart from that, we also discuss how different levels of the government, that is the state government and the local government, they have their own resources of revenue, so that they do not depend on the central government for the exercise of their power. The judiciary is again very important because it is the main organization, it is the main organ that helps to resolve all kind of conflicts between the central government and the state governments. Apart from that, the judiciary has the power, has the right to interpret the Constitution. In case of any confusion regarding the Constitution, the judiciary comes to help. We also discuss about the main objectives of a federal form of government, explaining that the main aim of the federal form of government is to accommodate social diversity and to increase unity amongst the common people, amongst the population and the people living in the country. We then discussed what are the main factors, what are the main features that make India a federal form of government, a federal system. The next factor that makes India a federal country is the division of power between the center and the state governments, which is mentioned in our Constitution as the union list, the state list and the concurrent list. The union list on which only the central government can make laws, the state list on which only the state government can make laws, and the concurrent list where both the governments can make laws. In case of a conflict, the central government, the law made by the central government tends to prevail. Yes. Next factor is that different constituent units in India, they have unequal powers, right? For example, Jammu and Kashmir a few months back had its own constitution, right? A number of features, a number of provisions of the Indian constitution were not applicable to Jammu and Kashmir. So this gave a special status to Jammu and Kashmir. Yes, some units like the union territories, they do not have any power of their own. They come directly under the control of the central government, and this makes the central government more powerful as well. Another factor that has made India a federal country is that this power sharing arrangement cannot be changed unilaterally. Yes, in order to make any such changes, such a proposal has to be passed by at least 2/3 of the majority of both the houses of the parliament, and then it has to be ratified by at least half of the state legislative assemblies. Again, the judiciary in India is very powerful. It has a right to interpret the constitution and also to settle down conflicts between the central government and the state governments, and between different states in case of any such conflict. The next important question that we discussed was what has strengthened federalism in India. We discussed three main points, that is linguistic states, that is states made on the basis of language. The effort was to help the people belonging to one linguistic group to live together, and this has increased harmony, unity, as well as it has increased administrative efficiency. Point number two spoke about language policy. India is a vast country with a huge linguistic diversity. So in India, we have not given the status of national language to any language. Hindi is an official language, and along with Hindi, we have 21 other scheduled languages. Any candidate who wants to appear for an examination conducted by the central government can opt for the regional language in which he or she wants to appear. So that means, although our government wants to propagate the use of Hindi, but we do not want to force it on anyone, just like the Sri Lankan people did it on the Tamil speakers. Yes, and in this way, India has prevented any kind of conflict based on language. And the third point that has strengthened federalism in India were the center-state relations. And we discussed that before 1990, we had a single-party government that used to be formed and at the center and the different states. However, in this case, in case the party at the center and the state was same, the central government tried to dictate its term to the state governments. In case of different parties at the center and the state, the central government tried to dismiss the state governments arbitrarily. So that means before 1990, in India, the state government did not enjoy much of autonomous powers. Of course, after 1990, we started off with an era of coalition government where the central government, the national party, had to enter with a number of regional level political parties in a coalition, yes, and form the government. In this case, yes, in case the central government wanted to form any kind of decision, it had to take any decision, it had to keep into consideration the interests of the regional parties also. So the regional parties, from now onwards, they started enjoying more autonomy. The states started enjoying more autonomous powers from now onwards. The last part of the chapter talked about decentralization, and the definition said that decentralization means when some powers of the central and the state governments are taken away from them and they are given to the third tier of the government. This is very important for a country like India, which cannot be managed by just one or two levels of the government. Yes, because India is a very vast country, vast in its extent as well as population. So there has to be a third tier of the government to take democracy to the grassroots level, to deepen democracy, and to help to increase participation of the people in democratic decisions. Right? So, of course, again we are going to we discuss about the amendment of 1992. Yes, and we saw how before this amendment, yes, there were certain problems associated with the third tier of the government, and those problems were that the elections to the local bodies were not held regularly. Right? Apart from that, the state government did not transfer adequate powers and resources to the third tier of the government. So the amendment of 1992 removed all these drawbacks. So some of the provisions were that a state election commission, yes, was established in order to ensure regular elections to the local bodies. Right? It was mandatory. It was from now on where it was mandatory to hold these elections after regular intervals of time. Apart from that, a number of certain proportion of seats were reserved for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and the people belonging to other backward classes. Similar reservations were made for women as well. Yes, from now on, but the state governments were required to share some of their revenue resources with the local governments. After that, we also discuss about the composition of the rural and the urban local bodies. In the rural areas, we discuss about the Panchayati Raj. Yes, the panchayats, they were the lowest level of the Panchayati Raj. Yes, so every village has a panchayat, right? And then a few panchayats, they form the block samiti, and on the head of the block samiti, we have the Zilla Parishad. So Zilla Parishad lies at the pinnacle of the Panchayati Raj system in India, and it is led by the collector. In the urban areas, we have the municipal corporations and the municipal committees. Municipal committees for areas with smaller populations, and municipal corporations, for example in Jaipur, we have a municipal corporation which is led by a mayor. Then we discussed about the assessment of the local bodies, and we see that there were certain positive as well as negative points. The positives were that the local bodies has helped to deepen democracy. It has taken democracy to the grassroots level. It has also increased, yes, participation of elected representatives in the local bodies. It has also increased women participation, women representation in the local bodies. Of course, there are certain drawbacks. For example, yes, although elections are now held regularly, but the The Gram Sabha does not meet regularly, right? Apart from that, even today, the state government, some of the state governments have not transferred adequate powers and adequate revenue resources to the local governments. So as a result, the local government have a long way to go. So with this, we come to an end of the chapter. I hope the chapter is very clear to each one of you. In case of any problems, please post your questions in the comment box, right? So please stay at home and stay fit. Goodbye till then.